Hello, and welcome to the ECR Retail Loss Sell More and Lose Less podcast series. My name is Colin Peacock. I work with a community of experts and academics who are keen to share their latest research findings and best practices. And every week or two in this series, I'll be joined by one of those experts and academics to discuss some of the very latest insights from our meetings and discussions and research on best practices. This week on the ECR Retail Loss podcast, we'll be joined by Professor Adrian Beck, who will discuss the issues around mobile scan and go at self-checkouts. This is when shoppers use their own phones to record what they're buying. Hey, we had a session last week on scan and go as part of the checkout working group. Very well attended, over 60 joined us. You started off with a snapshot survey. You've done a survey of some retailers before the meeting, and you shared those results. Then we had a retailer sharing their journey, and then other retailers sharing back their journeys and where they got to in terms of how do you control sort of scan and go when you have the proposition around bring your own device, which is different to a store supplied device. So we were really focused on bring your own device. So us, me or you, just taking our smartphone, going and scanning, and then walking out, sometimes being checked, sometimes not being checked. So what were your sort of takeaways, your thoughts and reflections on the meeting?
Yes, thanks, Colin. I really enjoyed this session. I learned a lot, and there was a lot of content, I think, that was really interesting in how this technology is being used. And the reason we did the snapshot survey was just to get a sense of where people are around some key issues around this. And you know, we ended up getting 45 companies to respond to the snapshot survey, which was great, of which 23 of them were using mobile SCO. So it was that group of 23 that shared their experiences. And you know, what was interesting, we asked them, you know, what percentage of transactions in the stores where this is available actually goes through mobile SCO? How many people are using this technology? And you know, it's remarkably few. You know, of those that responded, 74% of those that responded said that it's 3% or less of all transactions are going through using this technology. So a tiny proportion of transactions are currently going through this technology. And we heard around the issue of, you know, how do you get people to register, and it varied a lot around whether you got people to, you know, register their payments beforehand or not. A lot of variance around this. And of course, we know that one of the issues around this is how do you try and get control over people using it? How do you get the audit system that we're familiar with the, you know, when a retailer provides the scan device, that this audit is a key part, isn't it, of making sure you got some form of control. And so we heard from retailers how, you know, the extent to which people had audits in place. And whilst most had, there was a fair proportion that had no audit facility in place for customers using this. It was extraordinary. But also we asked people around one of the other thorny issues relating to this technology is if you're using some form of EAS tagging technologies, how does that interact with this when you're giving people so much freedom to walk around the store and scan and so on? And again, we had a really mixed picture around how retailers were dealing with this deactivation of tags. You know, where does it happen? How do you do it? With quite a few saying, we don't do it. We just let people walk out. If it's a soft tag, they just walk out, and we've got no means of trying to manage these issues. And it's a really big challenge, I think, in terms of that sort of existing form of product control and how that interacts with this technology. And then finally, we said, you know, how does this technology compare in terms of risk to you to other forms of SCO that you're using? And 45% said it generated a higher level of risk, they thought, than other forms of SCO, with another 46% saying it's about the same, and then relatively few saying it's a lower level of risk. So there's real concern, I think, about the amount of risk associated with this technology. So I think it was a very useful snapshot survey, just get a feel of how people are dealing with this, and particularly, you know, how many people are using it and what they're doing to try and control it.
It's extraordinary. I mean, it's you know, not many people using it. It's high risk. Why are the retailers carrying on? I don't understand it.
It is interesting, isn't it? And I've reflected on this because we heard from a number of retailers who talked about how they were using it, and you know, some of the issues around trying to get control over this. And for me, it really spoke to a degree around sort of almost this power of frictionless, you know, this desire by some retailers to offer the consumer as many different ways as they can to check out in their stores. This sense of we've got to give them choice. And so one choice is to give them this mobile technology. Even though virtually nobody wants to use it, you've got these tiny proportions of people going through it. And yet there's this potentially high level of risk associated with it. And one of the problems you have with this, and we know this with other forms of SCO, is it really begins to blur the boundaries for those who have responsibility for controlling loss in retail stores. The security guards in these stores are looking out for people who are stealing. They're trying to find the shoplifters and the shop thieves. This makes it even more blurry because you could have somebody walking around a store with a phone in their hand, scanning items or pretending to scan items. How do you know whether this is a thief or not? How do you know that they've scanned all the items that they're claiming are in their bag? So it yet further blurs these boundaries around what is going on in retail stores. But I think the other thing that struck me is to make this technology work, you really have to begin to compromise a lot of your existing controls. We've seen this debate around tags, haven't we? Where, one way is to say, well, we just got to take all the tags off now to make mobile SCO work because we don't know how to deactivate them. Really, you've only got less than 3% of customers using it, but you've decided to take all your tags off so that this tiny proportion of people can use this technology. But also, I think what struck me was, that trying to get it to work, trying to make sure you got controls in place. How do we make audits work? It feels like a lot of technologically based distraction for people working in these stores. You're spending all this time trying to get a technology to work without, giving you, highly inflated levels of risk for what is in effect less than 3% of all your transactions going through them. So for me, I walked away thinking, goodness, why do retailers keep bothering with this technology when at the moment so few people are using it, and it exposes you to what most are saying is high levels of risk, and you're having to compromise on lots of your existing controls that we know are doing a fairly good job?
Well, I guess one pushback might be that the devices that they've got, the ones they supply, probably go missing, and they're very expensive to maintain and upkeep. So very attractive to get people to use their own phones to scanning, and you don't have to buy that sort of inventory of those handheld devices. But we did hear from one retailer, who offers both. They offer the device and you can also use it. And I think it was like less than 10% of the Scan and Go transactions went through the bring your own device. Most of them used the store supplied device, which was perhaps designed and fit for purpose in terms of scanning.
Yeah, and I did a study back in 2016 where we looked specifically at mobile SCO and went through all the issues as to why people typically don't want to use it. And there are lots of challenges of using it. Not and we could list a few. One is, the device provided by a retailer uses infrared to scan barcodes. It's a very good way of scanning barcodes. It's very accurate. Whereas if you're using your camera on your phone, you've got to get the lighting right, you've got to make the distance right, and so on. Packaging can really influence the quality of the scanning. We also had this issue, haven't we, around the what we call the three hand syndrome, didn't we? Which was, you're holding your mobile phone in one hand, you got your basket in the other hand. How do you pick the product up? So there's this challenge of just making the mechanics of using your mobile phone in a shop work for you.
Yeah, that's why someone had lanyards, right?
Yeah, one company tried lanyards, and then they got concerned about lanyards because if the lanyard breaks, then who's liable for the loss if you break your phone whilst you're scanning? Or people made little cradles to put your phone into their trolleys, and then the concern was, well, do you want your £1,000 Apple phone sat in a trolley while you're wandering off to get products? So there's lots of sort of mechanical issues of how this works. I think if you're buying one or two items, the sort of the lunchtime trade, then it probably is quite useful for people to do that. But once you go beyond that, I think there are lots of technical issues that still make it a technology where relatively few customers are interested at this stage.
Yeah, it was interesting on the call. Clearly, there were some retailers who were still in the camp of trialing it, some who've gone back and come back in. And then we had a couple of others sort of said, well, we're just going to do a whole store that's smart, and then another retailer saying, well, we're trying the shopping carts that are smart. So
yes, it's part of this broad innovation around transformation and there's constant change around what SCO looks like in retail stores, and this has certainly been part of it. But I think for me the call was just very illuminating in how few people are using it, and it's the first time we've really had a snapshot survey that gave us those numbers. and B, the amount of compromise and challenges to make it work well. You do try and stack it. And I was trying to think of other technologies that retailers have introduced into their stores. And, retail's all about innovation, isn't it? We're trying out new things all the time. But how many technologies stand the test of time when so few customers actually use it? And I struggle to think of another one.
Yeah, well, look, we spoke earlier about face recognition. We had a session on that. We know for sure in 2025 there'll be a constant conversation around face recognition. Maybe more retailers would be using it, certainly in the UK and a few other markets. But on Scan and Go, using your mobile device, we will anniversary. Well, I will put a meeting on this time next year, but I don't know how big the interest will be. But maybe I have to broaden it. I don't know. But thank you so much for taking the time to share your notes and your thoughts. And certainly we will enjoy this time next year and seeing where it's got to on Scan and Go. Thank you. Well, that's all we have time for this week. Thank you for joining us. And thanks to all the ECR Retail Loss community for the sharing of their knowledge, their research and latest learnings that ensure that we become truly a global platform for learning. My name is Colin Peacock. This is the Sell More and Lose Less podcast. And if you liked it, please subscribe so you automatically get all future episodes. And also, if you think your colleagues and friends might also like it, please ask them to follow ECR Retail Loss on LinkedIn and tune in to our next podcasts. If you didn't like it, then let us know and we'll try and fix it. Either way, see you next time. Thank you again.